Hello everybody and welcome back to Game Dev number 3. Now today what we're going to be doing is we're going to be adding our animations to our character, as you can see here. Now you can also notice a lot of new things inside of this scene. So as you can see, we have like this really cool Asian environment. We actually have our character moving around. Like I said, we're going to be covering the animations in a little bit. We have the attack animation set up, all that cool stuff. So we're going to be knocking this out, showing you how I did that. And of course, you also notice that we're going to be using HDRP for our rendering. We're not going to actually touch on inside this video because HDRP was a pain to set up. But it's really, really awesome looking, I have to say. And of course, I think I'll be using more and more of it inside the future. But anyway, let's go ahead and get started with the actual tutorial on the animation side of things. Now, to begin with, whenever we're actually working with animations, you first off are going to need the animations for your character. Now, 90% of the time, your character is going to automatically have the animations attached to them. So if it came from something like Blender or maybe even Maya, you will notice that you can have your animations within your character. So if you click this little arrow, you can see all these animations here. And that's, of course, if they're already rigged, if they already have the animation set up. If they don't have the animation set up and you're importing, say, for instance, from Unity Asset Store and all, there are a couple of settings that you're going to need to take a look at. So the first thing that you want to do is come over here to the animation side of your character. Or not the animation, the rig side of your character. Now, inside the rig, you're going to notice this animation type. So there's two different types that you could work with. Oh, I guess there's three actually. So you have legacy, generic, and humanoid. So I'm not really sure what legacy is, never really used that. Generic is pretty much any normal character type. So they have legs, they have arms, that sort of stuff. Then, of course, you have humanoid, which essentially they are human. Now, keep in mind the humanoid has more bones attached to it. So it has like the finger bones, the hand bones, the arm bones, the neck bone, the head bones, etc. So just keep that in mind. Now, every single animation doesn't have this particular type of movement or bone structure. So if your bone structure is different, you may need to change the name of some of your bones and, of course, add some bones, all that sort of fun stuff. It's really not fun, but try to find a model that's compatible. If it comes from the Unity Asset Store, try to make sure that it's compatible with other Unity animations. That way you'll be able to make it run easily. Now, of course, since I already have my animations, I'm not worried about that. But what we need to do now is we're going to cover the script real fast, or not really real fast. But we've already done this script before when it comes down to the animation side of things. So I'm going to go ahead and show you guys the script, and all you have to do is just implement it within your code. So the first thing you want to do is open up the camera controller. Now, if you have not been following along inside these game devs, then you may want to go back and start following along from the beginning. But here we have this little input, or this function right here, the inside rotations. Now, what you want to do here is you're going to go over to this question, the if we're going to be moving at all, like our horizontal or vertical axis is moving, right? If we're aiming, then it's always going to make us look forward. Well, we also want to add this boolean. So we're going to add these two or signs right here. That should be like right below the backspace key on Windows. I'm not really sure what it is on Mac, but whatever. Then what you're going to do is you're going to plug in this override camera boolean, which was up here inside our variables at the way bottom. If you didn't have that, just make sure that you add that real fast. And what this is going to do is whenever we activate this override camera, it's going to automatically make sure that we're facing forward, or it's going to start the rotation to look towards where the camera is looking at. So the next thing we need to do is go over to our player controller. Now, inside our player controller, you're going to notice a couple new things. So at the top, you're going to see this right here. You're going to see a header called animation. So we're going to be able to have this separated from our jump settings. We want to create a public animator called anim. This is our animator. And then, of course, we're going to create a public float called transition time. This is going to be the time it takes for us to switch our animations. And of course, we have a float called current light attacks. Now, this is a private float. We don't want this to be public because we want to be able to determine what this float is going to equal throughout the code. So we're going to roll down, and the first thing we want to cover before we actually even cover the update area is we want to cover this void axis animation update function. So since you probably don't have this function, go inside your completed functions region. If you don't have that, that's okay. Just put it right below your void jump right here. And inside here, you're going to, of course, give it a couple of conditions. So the first condition we're going to give it is a string called axis name. Now the axis name is going to represent the horizontal or vertical axis that we're moving. So when we get to the update function, we'll be able to implement this. We also have a string for motion name. This is going to be what you're going to use inside the inspector, otherwise known as your parameter name. So for us, this would be like speed and direction. And then, of course, you would have the float for motion speed. So the reason why we have a float for motion speed is value is going to determine if we're running or if we're walking. That way we know, okay, if we're running, it's going to be equal to 1. But if we're walking, it's going to be equal to 0.5. And it'll automatically interchange between those, and it'll make our life so much easier. All right, so inside here, you're going to notice if we get this axis called axis name. So say, for instance, our axis is going to be a horizontal axis. We're going to say if our axis or horizontal is greater than 0, then we're going to lerp our current motion to the new motion speed, right? So if our current motion is 0, it's going to move 0 to equal our new speed. So say, for instance, we're walking, right? So it's going to go from 0 to 0.5. And since it's going to be greater than 0, we're going to be moving to the right by 0.5. Otherwise, we're going to say, okay, if our horizontal is less than 0, then it's going to send us in the opposite direction. So it's going to send us left by 0.5. And lastly, we're going to basically determine if we're not moving at all. So if our horizontal axis or vertical axis, depending on the axis name, is equal to 0, it's going to lerp our current motion. So say, for instance, we were walking, so we were at 0.5, it's going to bring us back down to 0. And of course, it's going to run us through the transition time, multiply that by time.delta time, the fun stuff. And that's all there is to this particular function. So once you get this function done, I'm going to scroll over real fast just so you guys can write that down. Make sure to pause the video and actually do get that written, whatever that word is. Then you're going to come over here to the void update. Now inside the void update, this is the main reason why we didn't actually write this physically, because it has a lot of information here, and I knew that you guys probably would not want to be sitting through an hour-long video. So we have this question. We're going to say if our speed is equal to run speed. So in other words, we're going to be checking if we're running, all right? Then we're going to grab our axis animation update, which is our, of course, function that we just discussed, and we're going to plug in our values. So our horizontal axis, our direction is the parameter we're going to be using, and we'll discuss that in a second as well. And our speed value is going to be 1 because we're running, right? And we're going to do the same thing with our vertical axis. So vertical, we're going to say speed and 1. Otherwise, so here's our else statement. We're going to say our horizontal, get our direction, and we're going to set it to 0.5. We're going to do the same thing with this. So we're going to say our vertical, our speed, and then 0.5. And that's all you need to control your motions. Now the next thing we're going to be doing is we're going to check and see if we're falling. So this part is very important because, say for instance, if we're jumping, right? We want to be able to say, okay, if we're on the ground or if we're off the ground, right? And it's going to be able to travel to our jumping node. So we're going to check our isFalling boolean, which is going to be a parameter we will create. And we're going to make it equal to our isFalling boolean inside of our script, which I believe we actually designed on our, I'm going to say last tutorial. Yeah, I'm going to say last tutorial, even though it could have been 2 tutorials ago. No, it was 2 tutorials ago. But yeah, that's all you really need to add there. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to do something that seems very complicated, but it really isn't. So we're going to ask a simple question. We're going to say if anim.getCurrentAnimatorStateInfo. So this is going to grab our layer info. Now our layers are going to work similar to arrays. In fact, they are going to work exactly like arrays. So the first array, which is our base layer, is going to be 0. And our next layer, which doesn't really exist until you add it or no, it's going to be equal to 1. It's going to continue going down and down and down. So it's going to be 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now currently we want to be able to grab our first layer because that's where our melee animation is going to be. So we're going to grab this state. We're going to say, okay, our first state, which is melee, we're going to ask for a name. So isName. And we're going to find our default state. So our default state is going to be the first state inside of our Animator controller. And we'll get more into that when we get to the Animator controller part. But we're going to be asking if all this is equal to false. So if we're not actually inside that state. Then we're going to say find object of type. We're going to grab our camera controller. So we're going to grab this script right here. And we're going to set it to override the camera. And we're going to say it's equal to true. So we're going to be setting this value true. That way our character will face forward. Right? Otherwise, so here's our else statement. We're going to find the object of type, camera controller. We're going to override it. And we're going to make it equal to false. So that way our character can rotate and all that cool stuff. Now, this right here, we will need to adjust later on to be able to make it more performance nice, I guess you could say. But for now, it does the job, so we're just going to leave it as is. The next thing we want to do is we want to be able to, of course, determine if we attack. So this is the last question that we're going to be doing here. Well, not really last question, but, you know, we're going to basically ask, okay, if we get our button down, which is our fire button, and now this you would normally put as fire 1. So Unity naturally has a input for fire 1, which is essentially your mouse 0 button or your left mouse click. Now I created a new input for fire, and you can do that if you want to. It's not absolutely necessary. Just make sure that you get the definition right. Then we're going to say and. So we're going to add that definitive and. We're going to grab our first layer state. So as you can see, our first layer, .name and default. So we're going to make sure that we are on the default state. If we're inside the attack state, we're not able to attack again until we go back to that default state. The next thing we want to do is we want to add this. So we're going to say if this is true. So if we're able to do this, we're going to grab our animation or animator. We're going to set its trigger to attack. So this is another parameter that we're going to use. Then we're going to add a force. Now I decided to add this force because my character was attacking, yes, but how we have it set up is it's going to override the original base layer, which means the attack is actually going to override the movement like walking, running, jumping, all that sort of stuff. So for me to alleviate the problem of how it looked is that I decided to push the character forward a little bit. And you'll, of course, have to decide how you want it to go. But I went ahead and added a force, forward, put a solid value there, that sort of thing. You don't have to do that if you don't want to. That is just completely optional. Then we have, of course, the set attack. So we're going to grab our current attack. So we're going to say if our current light attack is less than 1, because a blend space goes between 0 or -1 and 1, we're going to say our current light attack plus equals 0.5. So we're going to increase our value by a set point. Now I only have 3 animations inside of my attack blend space. So The more you have, make sure that you divide this number by that amount. So you have 4.25. If you have 6, like, what is that? 0.15, I think. I could be wrong. I probably am. But, you know, just divide it properly so you can have a full attack for every single one. Then we have this else statement. Current light attack is equal to 0. So this will just reset us and allow us to attack again and again and again and again. Lastly, we're going to set our float, which is our current light attack. This is another parameter. And we're going to set it equal to this current light attack. And that's it. That's all we have to do with our animation. So I'm going to scroll right back over it one more time so you can see our animation side of things. Let's just roll over a little bit. I know it's a lot of information. Probably so much easier for me to copy and paste this, but I think that it's a whole lot better for you guys to actually pick it up by learning it rather than just copying it. So, yeah. All right. I think that's enough of that part, so let's go ahead and save this. We're going to head back over into Unity. So here we are. Now, inside of Unity, you're going to create a player controller or a character animator, right? So I'm going to go over to my Animator tab. If you don't got this, that's okay. And you're going to right click, go over to create, and you're going to find a animator controller. So once you got that done, you're going to go and open it up by double clicking it. Now the first thing you want to do inside of this is you're going to go over to your layer tab right here. So you can see like parameters and you can see layers. You're going to press this plus key to give yourself a new layer, and then you're going to name it melee. So as you can see, I got melee sitting there. Now if you click this little cog right here, you're going to see the weight. The weight allows us to be able to determine how much weight or how much this will override other layers. And each time you have a layer that's below this layer, it's going to override the previous layer if the weight is set to 1. So just keep that in mind. A mask is very important if you want to be able to limit a character's motion. Say, for instance, if you want them to only use their hands or if you only want them to use their feet. It really just depends. Say, for instance, you have the blending. So you have override and you have additive. Now, be very careful with these. But for this tutorial, we're going to go with override. Additive just simply combines your animation with the other animation, and it can come up with some pretty interesting setups. All the rest of it, don't worry about it for now. That gets into some complex stuff, but yeah. So the first thing we want to cover for this is we want to cover our melee settings. So let's go into our parameters, set up our speed float, our direction float, our is falling boolean, our jump trigger, our death trigger, our current light attack, which is a float, and our attack, which is a trigger. To add these, all you need to do is press the plus key, add the value or whatever it is, rename it, and make sure that you leave these exactly as they're spelled here. So capital S, capital D, lowercase I, capital F, capital J, capital D, capital C, L, A, and capital A. So just make sure you've got those set up exactly how they're spelled. Otherwise, the script is not going to actually read any of this. All right, so as I was about to say, we're going to cover our melee attack first. So to create this melee layer, you're going to right click, go over to create state, and then from here, you're going to simply give this state a name. So we're going to call it default. Now, if you already have something called this, it's going to give it a number value. So just make sure that you don't use the one with the number value. Now, for you to actually make something start off as the base default, you're going to right click it and then set as layer default state. Okay. From there, you're going to create a blend space. So you're going to go right click, create from new blend tree. From here, you're going to come over here, call it attack. Once you have that done, you're going to go into that inside here or double click it, right? And you're going to select it. There, you're going to make sure that it's set to 1D. You're going to select the parameter and you're going to select current light attacks. From there, you're going to add some motion fields, and these are going to be each animation for your attack. Okay? You're going to go ahead and select that little thing, and then you're going to select the attacks you want to use. And as you can see, if we press play, it's going to do that attack. If I go and keep adding another attack, and I pull this little marker over, you're going to notice that he does another attack. If I do this again, it's going to add that next attack. So that's super, super cool. And you can just keep adding these attacks. Just make sure that you change what the... Or, I mean, it can automatically do it too if you just press the plus key as well. So, and if things are going too slow, you can always speed up the animation. So you can change that to like 2. And as you can see inside this preview menu right here, he speeds up as well. So you could slow it down if you want to. So just keep that in mind. Okay, so once you have the melee set up, I'm going to go ahead and delete that since I already got mine set up. You're going to go over to your base layer. Or actually, first things first, we need to talk about transitions. So I know I'm jumping the gun, guys. I'm jumping the gun. So with our transition from our default state, you're going to make sure that your default state has no motion value. Now, the reason why we have this is because we don't want our default to override our base layer. Because as you notice inside of the layers, we have the blending set to override on both the base layer and the melee layer. So if we set our default to none, this is not going to actually affect the base layer at all. So we don't have to change the weight. We can keep it out 1 and not have to worry about a thing. Now for the transition, you're going to right click your default state, make transition, and then select your attack state. You want to make sure has exit time is off, and you want to set the condition to attack. So what's going to happen is it's going to run through the base attack or base state and then go into attack mode. Now to return, you're going to simply right click, make transition back to default. And as you can see, has exit times off, and you can see the conditions are empty. So once it finishes the attack, it's going to return, and we don't have to worry about a thing. All right, let's go ahead and hop into the base layer. Now this is something that you'd probably seen in many of my tutorials before. All it really is you're going to have a die function, a jump function, and a blend space for motion. So the die state is simply just a random state. So create state, empty, call it die, and then you're going to add your death animation. You're going to create a trigger, or not trigger, transition from any state to die. You're going to roll down, make sure that has exit times off, and you're going to set death as the condition. You can do the same thing for the jump function. So you're going to right click, create state, empty, create that transition between any state and jump, and make sure that you, of course, has exit times off, and of course the condition is falling is equal to true, and jump trigger is activated. From there, you're going to make sure that you did create that blend tree for motion, and you're going to create that transition from jump to motion. Has exit time is off or false, and is falling is equal to false. So whenever we actually land, we're going to go back into our motion. Keep in mind, this is the layer default state for our base layer. So we're going to go and double click inside there. Now this one is a little bit more complex than the other one. So remember how the other one was 1D, right? So this is a 2D freeform directional. We have a direction for our x-axis and a speed for our y-axis. And if you take a look at our parameters, as you can see, speed and direction. And if you remember inside our code, we actually covered this whenever we set up our completed function down here, where we had our speed, or actually I believe it's in our animation right here. Yeah, our horizontal and vertical accessing our direction and speed. Now with this, all you're going to do is you're going to add in the motion values just like we did before, but you're going to have two different conditions here. You can have your X and your Y. So you want to come up with something similar to this. You're going to set up your runs first. So run and walk forward, your idle state, your walk and run backwards. So as you can see, 1.5, 0, negative 0.5, negative 1. Then you want to take care of your lefts and rights. So you're going to have run left, strafe right, run right. So it'd be negative 1, negative 0.5, 0.5, and 1 on the X value. And of course, you can mess around with the speed as well. You can test it out by pressing play, grabbing this red dot. Just do something like that, see if you like it, and so on. Now, this is one other thing. I always say it in every single one of my animation videos. Make sure that you go over to your character's animations. You select the character, and if it is an animation that needs to loop, say for instance if it's a idle animation, right? So idle with weapon. Roll down and make sure that it is set to loop time. You could also set loop pose if you want to. That's up to you. But loop time is absolutely necessary. So just make sure that you do that. But if it was something like a die state, so if I actually selected our death, right? We don't want the character to just repeat the method again, right? So all we're going to do is make sure that loop time is off. So just follow those simple instructions and it should work out efficiently. All right, so we're going to head back over to our game. Let you guys see it one more time before going in this. Hit play. And of course, it might take a second. HDRP is like that. But as you can see with everything that we have here, it's a really, really cool system to work with. And of course, the script works flawlessly. So as you can see, if we hit left click, it attacks, left click again, it's doing different attacks every single time. Now you may experience a double attack on occasion. So if I double click, it's going to do that double attack. And this is because it is still inside the default state when that double click is attached. Now, even though this is an issue, I sort of like it, but if we find a solution to it in the future, I will be sure to fix it. But as you can see, everything works out really, really well. You have the strafe, the right strafe, you have the run strafe. It's transitioning really, really fast and efficiently, and so on. Now, the last thing we do before I actually close out this video is we need to take a look at our inspector, because there are a couple things that you guys do need to know before we actually end this. So I'm going to grab my player. Whenever you set up these transition times, make sure that you test above 5, because if it's below 5, what's going to happen is you're probably not going to see any change whatsoever. 10 is going to be an extremely good amount of change, so it's going to be a constant change. It's going to be from point A to point B, like a snap of a finger. But if you have it at 1 or below 1, it's just not going to work out that well. So I just wanted to let you guys know before you guys got started with that. And of course, if you needed to add your animator, just simply click and drag and drop. Alright, I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, make sure that you leave a like, subscribe, check out some other videos. And of course, if you have any questions, make sure you go to the comment section and of course, write those questions. If you have any improvements into the game itself, make sure you leave those inside the comments as well. Alright, I'll see you guys next time.